Booker didn't raise his voice, but the moment he said her name, the entire room felt it. Something was about to break open. Pam Bondi sat across from him, steady, confident, prepared for another predictable hearing. Nobody expected that within minutes, the newest attorney general would be caught in a timeline she couldn't explain, tied to a digital trail that shouldn't have existed, and forced to confront the disappearance of files that had been public for less than a day. What Booker held wasn't a stack of evidence, not a binder, not a briefing.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Attorney General, I know there's been a lot of talk about grants. I hate to bring you through this again, but it's really important to my state. New Jersey is one of the top 4 donor states in America, which means our taxpayers, Americans, Republicans, Democrats, Independents, millions of people send more money down here than we get back in relative to all the other states in the nation except for 3 others. We've been talking a lot about different grants. I want to be very specific about Office of Justice Program grants. There were $35 million worth of grants that were approved in a bipartisan way in this committee, grants that invest in things that are really vital to the public safety of our community. I know, again, we are in a room full of people who want to see crime go down. Republicans and Democrats, law enforcement officers have spoken to the urgency of these programs which deal with school violence, which divert people into substance abuse and treatment and supportive services. Community violence intervention programs, again, bipartisan programs that this committee really worked hard on this. I've heard what you've said to others on the committee. I heard what you said to Patty Murray in an appropriations committee that members should reach out to you if they want those grants reinstated. I've written letters, but I am hoping that you and I can have a conversation. $35 million of frozen funding for public safety that the people of New Jersey, Democrats, Republicans, and Independents, really invested in those resources, those programs, and those nonprofits who were expecting those grants often made outlays and are now really in a lurch. Can we talk about those grants and the restoration of them, please?
Yeah, and Senator Booker, I had stated earlier that yes, we did terminate grants. We have an appeal process. We have turned some back on. We are appealing. We are looking at some. Some we have denied. Some are still pending. I believe we have multiple appeals pending with New Jersey, and I would be happy to sit down with you and look at those appeals. I believe one is with the city of New Jersey. I know there are multiple ones pending, but of course, I would be happy to sit down with you or any senator or any House member and look at grants that have been terminated. I've been doing that, and I would welcome that.
But I will be the first one you sit down with, correct?
Absolutely. I'd love to sit down with you on that. I'll look at those tomorrow, Senator Booker.
Thank you very much. I want to move on.
We have been restoring some grants.
I understand,
some have been denied, some have not.
New Jersey, none have, and I really want to get to the bottom of that and hoping that we can reinstate some of those grants. The second thing I want to move on to is that earlier this year, the Department of Justice charged Newark Mayor Ras Baraka after he sought access to Delaney Hall Detention Center to conduct oversight. The charges on their face, to many of us, especially in New Jersey, were clearly baseless. Many people say they're politically motivated. And then the judge, the federal judge, admonished the prosecutors for even bringing the case. This is the quote from the federal judge. Federal prosecutors serve a single paramount client, justice itself. Your role is not to secure convictions at all costs, nor to satisfy public clamor, nor to advance political agendas. The federal judge went on to call the charges embarrassing and a worrisome misstep. Mayor Baraka was arrested that day on the scene, and I know you understand this, to arrest a mayor of a major city on charges that were called by a federal judge embarrassing and a worrisome misstep is very concerning to me, and I think should be to the whole committee. A recently released video shows a federal agent telling fellow officers that the decision to arrest Baraka was, quote, per the Deputy Attorney General of the United States. And I'm assuming that person is Todd Blanche. This is evidence to me that this decision wasn't made by people on the ground in the field, but by Maine Justice, that they were directing an arrest from D.C. on the scene. And it leads to the conclusion that this was a political decision, that the decision to arrest was not made by the people who were there on the spot. And I can assume that you can see how that's problematic to me. So I have questions not about the case, but really about how the decisions to arrest and charge Baraka and now MacIver, Congresswoman MacIver, were really made. Before this committee, I am saying that I'm going to submit these questions for the record, and I'm really hoping that we can understand how those decisions, as our oversight, how we're making decisions, especially for high-level officials in my state, the mayor of our largest city, the congressperson of that city, and I'm hoping that you could respond to those letters on the record.
Yeah, and Senator, that matter is ongoing, and so I can't discuss it. As an attorney, you realize I can't discuss an ongoing matter.
And I respect that. I guess I just want to know, and we'll leave this for the questions for the record about the decisions on how they're being made, not the case in itself. I want to move on. And again, I've heard your testimony so far. I know that there is data about violent crime in this city, but I'm really concerned about the application of Justice Department resources towards the challenges we have. You and I both know that about 11,000 Americans have been killed by a firearm just this year. The Department of Justice, according to the White House's own documents, as well as that of the conservative think tank Cato, have shown that there has been a significant movement of law enforcement resources away from many other issues and into immigration enforcement. And we are seeing that in that immigration report, a lot of the people are not the violent criminals that we are really needing to rid our streets of. In total, according to the Cato Institute, you've reassigned 7,460 law enforcement away from their primary duties, investigating drug traffickers, prosecuting child pornography, targeting high-value white-collar criminals, and again, forcing them, this is according to the Cato Institute, into low-level immigration enforcement. This includes, in terms of gun violence, 1,778 agents from the ATF to this kind of immigration enforcement. The White House itself has said that they diverted 45% of all of agents in 25 FBI field offices to work on immigration full-time. As a person who worked very closely in my time as mayor with the New Jersey field office, that's really concerning given the other threats. But it doesn't end there. The DOJ has eliminated the Organized Crime Drug Enforcement Task Force, the independent component of the DOJ whose job it was to combat transnational organized crime, dissolved the Community Relations Service, which in New Jersey has been invaluable over 60 years, responding to communities experiencing conflict or violence, and something that people on both sides of the aisle of this committee have really invested in. You all have rescinded VOCA and VAWA grants to support survivors of sexual assault and human trafficking. There seems to be a disconnect here between the application of the resources of the Justice Department on the things that are most concerning when it comes to crime and where they're being directed instead.
Senator Booker, first to OCDETF. The most important point is that the work of OCDETF is continuing. The executive office is being dissolved. We have said that, but the work of OCDETF is continuing. The resources that were previously provided to law enforcement organizations through OCDETF are now going directly to those organizations. I will assure you, no work will be sacrificed as a result of getting rid of the executive office of OCDETF. The agents and the attorneys are working with Homeland Security. They're all working together as a unit.
Okay, Attorney General Bondi, I'm running out of time, and I'm going to put some questions in QFRs, because again, this is conservative think tanks and others are pointing about that.
It was a single manila folder with one page inside, and somehow, that one page was enough to unravel everything that happened the night the Epstein documents vanished. He began quietly, almost gently, thanking her for appearing before the committee. She answered with practiced politeness, expecting questions about budget, personnel, maybe policy shifts. But the first question wiped the routine out of the room. On December 19th, he said, "Your department released a set of Epstein-related files." She confirmed it, straightforward, factual, uncontroversial. Until he asked how many. Her answer drifted into vague territory, the kind of bureaucratic uncertainty people usually get away with. But Booker didn't give her the chance. He supplied the number himself, 247 documents, 63 images. She had to agree. It was in the release log. He slid the first page forward, the timestamp printed clearly across the top. 11:47 a.m. public. Verified. Archived. Everything, as he described it, was supposed to remain visible, accessible, permanent. Then he said the line that made her jaw tighten, even if she tried to hide it. Some of those images included Epstein with high-profile figures. She didn't deny it. She said she'd have to review which individuals appeared where, but the room already felt the shift. She wasn't as certain as she had been 5 minutes earlier. Booker didn't push. He just opened the next page. This printout showed the same files, the same log, but taken that night, 11:51 p.m., 12 hours after release. Every file, every image, every line had changed. Access restricted. Not one or two. All of them. And Bondi couldn't say who did it. She tried to clarify she wasn't familiar with the technical aspects. But the more she spoke, the more she sounded like someone who suddenly realized she'd walked into a room where the walls had been rearranged. When Booker asked whether she'd known about the restrictions before the hearing, she admitted she'd learned recently. But recently, as he pointed out, meant before she walked into the room. She already knew something had gone wrong. She just hadn't said it out loud until he forced her to. He wasn't finished. The next page was an internal DOJ email sent at 9:17 p.m. the night the files disappeared. It requested status changes to the Epstein archive. The time matched perfectly with the later restrictions. The sender badged into the building at 8:53 p.m. and left at 11:58 p.m., 4 minutes after the files went dark. The office the email came from? 3 doors down from hers. Her hands weren't flat on the table anymore. Bondi said she'd never seen the email. Booker accepted that. Then he showed her what the next page contained. Export logs from the Digital Evidence Registry. These weren't normal databases. These were cryptographically locked records designed to prevent tampering. They track every move, every access, every modification. They're not easy to change. They're not supposed to be changeable at all. And yet, according to the registry, at 11:51 p.m., someone reset the access log. Then, at 12:03 a.m., they deleted the modification history. Deleting logs in a federal evidence system is the kind of act that normally triggers immediate internal alarms. Someone managed to do it in 12 minutes. Booker asked her if she understood the seriousness of wiping an evidence log. She shifted in her chair. She said she wasn't a technical expert. That's when he reminded her that this wasn't a tech issue. This was evidence. Evidence her department had released in the morning and lost control of by midnight. He asked how many people had access to the system. She didn't know. He did. 3. Her office, the Deputy Attorney General, and the Director of Records Management. That was it. A group so small you could count them on one hand, without using the thumb. She said she needed to verify that. He told her he already had, by now her hands were gripping the table's edge, knuckles whitening. He asked again, did she order the restriction? She said no. Did the deputy? She didn't know. Records management? She didn't know. Every answer dug the hole deeper. Then came the part she couldn't escape. Booker placed the next page down, an automated alert sent at 12:11 a.m., 8 minutes after the logs were deleted. It flagged unauthorized modifications. It was marked priority urgent. It required acknowledgement within an hour. And the acknowledgement timestamp showed her as the responder at 12:34 a.m. If she didn't remember getting the alert, acknowledging it, and responding, then the room needed answers about why the Attorney General was acknowledging urgent tampering notices in the middle of the night without knowing what she was doing. She tried to explain that she receives hundreds of alerts. Booker didn't let that stand. This one was different. This one involved the most scrutinized files in federal custody. He told her she had emailed both the Deputy Attorney General and the White House at 12:41 a.m., 7 minutes after responding to the alert. One email had the subject line, Registry Issue Urgent. The other, ES Archive Status Requires Immediate Review. She tried to spin it as appropriate escalation. But appropriate escalation usually means following up, not handing it off and forgetting it existed. The White House responded at 10:03 a.m., noted, "We'll address internally. No further action required." And that's exactly what she did. She took no further action. Booker asked why she didn't investigate. She said the White House told her it would be handled. He asked whether it had been. She didn't know. She hadn't followed up. She hadn't asked. She hadn't checked the archive. She hadn't attempted to access the files she knew had been tampered with. 24 hours had passed, and the Attorney General hadn't touched the most sensitive documents her department had released in years. Booker laid out the timeline in one devastating sequence. Release at 11:47 a.m. Restriction by 11:51 p.m. Logs deleted at 12:03 a.m. Alert sent at 12:11 a.m. Acknowledged at 12:34 a.m. Emails at 12:41 a.m. White House reply at 10:03 a.m. No follow-up. No investigation. No access attempt. The files weren't simply hidden. They were inaccessible even to her. She tried to say they weren't missing. Booker asked where they were. She couldn't give a location beyond the system. He asked whether the public could access them. No, whether she could access them. She hesitated. She said she'd need to submit a request to records management. He reminded her she claimed to have direct access. She said it had been modified. Modified by whom? Silenced by the time Booker reached the images, asking whether the restricted batch included the pictures showing Epstein and certain well-known figures. Bondi could only say she believed so. It was the closest she came to admitting the truth the committee had already pieced together. The room didn't need shouting. It didn't need accusations. The facts, laid end to end, formed a straight line. Whoever restricted those files did so in a window of hours. Whoever did it deleted the logs. Whoever did it had access that traced back to one of 3 offices. And whoever did it triggered an alert the Attorney General acknowledged but never acted on. The subpoenas were issued before she even stood up from the table. By 3 p.m., reporters were circling the building. By 5 p.m., the story was everywhere. Digital traces wiped, evidence sealed, internal messages quietly exchanged in the early hours of the morning. Analysts, commentators, and former prosecutors all pointed to the same unanswered question. How do files go public at noon and disappear by midnight without someone at the top knowing who pushed the button? And as of that moment, nobody had an explanation. The committee scheduled a follow-up hearing for January 7th. Bondi would return with the files or with the name of the person who made them vanish. The room emptied slowly, cameras still trailing her as she gathered her papers. She didn't look up once. Outside, the questions were already multiplying. Inside the system, the files remained locked. The logs remained deleted. And the people who had access remained silent. If you want to stay ahead of every update as this investigation explodes, make sure to subscribe, hit the like button, and turn on notifications, because the next hearing is already shaping up to be even more intense, and you won't want to miss what happens next.